All right, James. We have two commenters. One was responding to another one, so we're getting into like a three-way dance here, as they say. Chevalierde Johnstone and Obloc Hitta. Right, I'm gonna say it like that because I think that's what it sounds like. Obloc Hitta. Basically, Chevalierde said the whole idea of the Iliad is the Greeks are actually making fun and criticizing the gods for they're kind of dicks, but they're like that through all of mythology. They're vain. They kill people and do horrible things to people just to make a bet, unlike other gods. But they also it's supposed to be a critique of, let's say, the ancient Greek belief in gods. Also, he feels that Odysseus, okay, who usually we think of as the hero, Odysseus is actually his actions being sly and using his mind and trickery are denigrated in the Odyssey. It's supposed to show that he is, because of his dishonorable feminine trickery, that is why he is being punished. Now, no, Oblak Hitta feels different. He thinks that the Iliad and these stories are praising their gods, and that also that Odysseus is essentially heroic because he's using his mind and trickery, and he can't. I mean, he can't. How is he? I'll bring it up later, but like, how else is he supposed to deal with the threats that he has in the Odyssey, which are not? It's not a battle story. It's a story of supernatural creatures that he has to somehow survive against to get home to get revenge. So, with these two, for our two readers in the comments, we've addressed this video and this controversy. What is your opinion on the Iliad and the Odyssey in terms of, well, we say it, are the Greek, is it an indictment of the Greek gods, and is Odysseus, is he supposed to be looked at negatively?
It depends on whether or not he's cutting your throat or not. Both of these characters are monsters to their enemies when they defeat their enemies. Achilles butchers men that are waiting to be taken captive. He sacrifices. He does human sacrifices. He's as willing to sacrifice to his gods as Abraham was to his God. Okay, so this debate is really a modern Christian debate between modern Christians and kind of nominally Christian intellectuals. One did the same man write both books. I think the same man did write both books. They're both 24 books in one. The debate between the people that propose that Odysseus was the greater hero because he's more survivable. He survives, and he's able to regain his kingdom, where Achilles survives in a foreign land. Modern people look upon that as punishment on Achilles for being rash and violent. And then there's the other debate that Achilles is too duplicitous, or that Odysseus is too duplicitous and Achilles is more direct and honorable. And then there's the debate over the depiction of the Greek gods. Okay, the Greek gods are depicted in both of Homer's books as being sympathetic to humans, as caring about humans. Some of them are shown to have petty characteristics, mostly the gods of arts and the female gods. Okay, both heroes are understood to be foredoomed. There is, in the Iliad and the Odyssey, both times, the god that is most often described as God Almighty, also Zeus. In both books, he calls together a council of the gods, very much like Yahweh would consult a council of angels, and discuss the plight of humans. And he he does describe the human as being the most miserable creature in creation, to have it worse than any of the animals. And he pleads with the other gods for some kind of benediction for Achilles and for Odysseus, both in their own stories. Okay, so Achilles means sorrow of the people. As far as I've been able to translate, Odysseus means grieved lord. Both of these characters in the Iliad are very pious and make every sacrifice to the gods that they're told to make. They're both very pious. In the Iliad, which is supposed to be where Achilles shines, Odysseus is more active than Achilles. Odysseus is the one out there winning battles, getting stuff done, setting ambushes, going out like commandos in World War II, him and Diomedes, and capturing a Trojan. Okay, getting information out of him by lying to him, and then coming back and saying, hey, you know, they're coming because we tricked this one Trojan into telling us what was going on.
He came up with the Trojan horse.
Okay, right. He came up with that, which was put together by Epius the carpenter, who was a champion boxer. But and he's also very good friends with Achilles. He fights over Achilles' body when Achilles is killed.
I remember that.
In the Odyssey, he goes to hell.
Right.
Okay, it's not really hell. Christian hell is an amalgamation of Hades and these and Norse hell. Okay, so he goes to the underworld and talks to Achilles.
That's right.
Who is basically the chief of the forlorn souls in the afterlife. They're not suffering damnation, but they don't really have any life. All they have is kind of a memory that they used to be alive. And
drink blood.
Odysseus is the guy that's crafty enough to actually go and speak to people in the afterlife and come back and inform the living. And when he does that, he makes a promise to a prophet who he meets in the afterlife to make a sacrifice to the gods, which entails the undertaking of a pilgrimage that's greater than any pilgrimage that a Muslim would take to Mecca, which means going back into the Aryan homeland, into the steppes where you will be killed.
That's right.
He's supposed to carry an oar inland until he runs into a man that doesn't know what an oar is, and he mistakes it for a threshing pole. Then he's supposed to do a triple sacrifice. Now, Odysseus, on the way home, is amongst all of the chiefs of the Achaean army in forgetting to make a sacrifice to Poseidon.
Oh, yeah, that's where you get messed up.
So, therefore, he and everybody else are they are doomed to a bunch of bad things happening to him. Now, when he's getting away, he suffers from hubris because he's arrogant. When he tricks the Cyclops, and he doesn't know what the Cyclops is, that he's a son of Poseidon, when he tricks him, he brags to him and tells him who he is. So then the Cyclops, who he blinded, is then able to tell his father Poseidon who defeated him, and then Poseidon continues the vendetta against him until God Almighty and all the other gods get together and they override Poseidon. They're like, look, going a little bit too far here. You know, we shouldn't single out a mortal. You know, they got it bad enough. This guy's had a horrible life. He's lost everything. He's got a terrible life. We punished him enough. Let him go home. Now, his trickster aspect, he is obeying the gods every step of the way. Every step of the way, the archangel, that comes to see him, and the minor angels that come to see him, all advise him to do things exactly how God says to do it. And he does so. So what Christians look at when they look at a summary of the Odyssey that's maybe been edited for children or something like that, they look at it through a Christian lens, and they see punishment for being a trickster when he was being pious by being a trickster. He had very specific things that he had to do, and if he veered from this in any way, he was going to be cursed, and he had to make sacrifices after the fact. Okay, plus he was not assured of victory. He had to fight.
Oh, yeah.
And at any time he was mortal, he knew he could be killed. Now, the Achilles is also accused of impiety, largely because he wants to affront the gods, but he does not. He does submit to the gods, but he does say to Priam, when he's letting Priam have back the body of his son Hector, that God's got it out for us. You know, he said, God decides, on a whim, whether we're going to suffer or whether we're not going to suffer. So we're in this together. He doesn't recommend revolting against the gods. Now, the character that goes against the gods is Diomedes, and he is never mentioned by Christians, and he is forgotten by Christian antiquarians. If there was any character that was going to try to overthrow heaven, it was Diomedes, and he won 2 gods, including war. Okay? And God Almighty says to war, I almost wish he would have killed you because of all my children. You're the most miserable. I hate you. But I have to heal you because you're my son. So, and God is referred to most often as Almighty, and second most often, if my recollection is right, across these 2 poems, as Father of gods and men. Okay, so we're clearly talking about the Creator.
Right? Well, I'll just say that, I haven't read these in a long time. I would just say that, because one was mentioned that the ending, the awesome ending where he pretends to be an old beggar and he kills these motherfuckers that take over his wife's household, and the wife helps him because she knows.
And it has to do with the bow.
Right.
Okay. Right.
So they were saying that ending was tacked on later. What do you think of that theory?
Okay, that is one theory, but because the Greeks, the time that was written, no longer used the bow, it is more than likely that it is the most ancient part of the poem. Okay, now with all of these poems, there were numerous versions of them. Homer was only reciting his story of a portion of the war at Troy. Okay, that's it. That's all he was reciting. The Odyssey is made up of 3 very distinct parts. The beginning, it's about Telemachus and the house. The middle, which is Odysseus' rendition of his journeys, and then the last part, which is Odysseus getting his kingdom back and obeying the gods. Okay, to the letter. So it's there is a book written by Quintus Smyrnius in the Christian era called The Fall of Troy, which is about which is yet another story of Troy, and all of these stories were understood by Homer and by Hesiod and by Quintus Smyrnius. So these things were understood, but they didn't feel like they were writing for each other, for fellow authors and poets, so they didn't feel like they had to educate you about everything that went on at Troy. The actual, Homer's Iliad doesn't even cover a year of a 9-year war.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I would just say, the Iliad's like a war story, right? The Odyssey, I mean, the beginning and the end are sort of like more realistic. But I mean, if you're Odysseus, you have to use your brain and trickery and stuff, because he's trying to survive against much more powerful supernatural entities. So I'm looking at it from that point of view. It's like, he was, he won, or he survived barely because he had to use his trickery, and that can only be a good thing because he was outmatched by these creatures. And
ultimately, we're modern people, and we're either Christian or post-Christian, depending on who we are. We're looking at it through a very tarnished and distorted lens.
C.S. Lewis was definitely right about that. I love Varg, but we can never truly be pagan, I guess. We're sort of post-Christian.
But it's... and the other thing is that there were some theories that the Odyssey was possibly written by a daughter of Homer, Well,
What feminists made up that
all
one?
these things were team efforts. How these things were probably composed was that he was the supervisor,
Oh,
and he had 24 poets under him.
oh yeah.
Each one of them was specializing in memorizing one of the books, one of the 24 books of each poems, and he was like the conductor.
Yeah,
And
all
they
right.
each had a different instrument to play.
All right, you'll never know for sure, but all right.
Think of one of these modern, uh, you know, uh, authors that
Oh.
just has like younger authors write for them.
Yeah, yeah. I can think of the names, but I can't think of them right now. Like, yeah, they're writing 80 novels. You tripping. So, anyway, all right. That was just real quick questions. Just real quick. We'll end it like in 30 seconds. In Rome, like in the legions, were they able to read in Latin the Iliad and the Odyssey? Was it translated, and would like a Roman centurion know about the story or read it while he was like on campaign somewhere?
I'm not sure if there are Latin translations in available to any of the legionnaires, but every officer in the legion above a centurion would have a Greek slave that was an academic that would actually be able to recite any of these poems. So you probably had these things being recited for the soldiers, and the Romans would have really favored the parts where Hector shined, because Hector was the hero of the Trojans, and the Trojans were pretty well understood to be the ancestors of the Romans.
Oh, okay. Wow, that's interesting. I wish I knew more about this stuff, but anyway, all right, good vid, man. We addressed 2 questions: Obloc, Hitta, and Chevalierde Johnstone. So,
All right.